Well, more on our discussion on party manifestos now. The ANC, the DA, the EFF securing most of the votes in the 2019 elections. All of them have produced comprehensive and specific plans. But do manifestos actually draw in voters? Nicholas Bauer, the author of South Africa's Easy Election Guide, who to vote for in 2024, has taken an in-depth look. He joins Vuyo and myself now. Nicholas, welcome back to Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405. Do manifestos matter?
I think to a certain extent, Stephen, and first of all, thanks very much for the opportunity, and of course, welcome back to the listeners as well. They matter to a certain extent, but I think that what people need to look at is the actual core beliefs of a party. I think in many ways, a manifesto can be an electoral gimmick. Every single election, whether or not it's a local or a national election, we see parties produce a document. Do they really keep to any of the promises? Do they keep to the majority of the promises that are contained therein? I don't believe that they actually do. And it's something to try and entice voters to the ballot box on the day. And I think voters need to be a little bit more circumspect. I mean, manifestos in many ways are a wish list, especially for parties that we know are not going to be in power come the May 29th election. And I understand it's going to be different. We look at the possibility of a coalition government, but you know, do parties, even ones that have been on the scene for a very long time, like the PAC, are they really going to have a bite of the cherry of governance? Will the ATM will cope? They will produce manifestos. Does that matter? I'm not too sure it does.
A question I still ask myself, Nicholas. I mean, yes, I mean, even after 30 years of having covered every election, you know, is whether people look at manifestos before deciding who to vote for.
I'm not too sure if they do. Certainly this is my 7th election, and even as a political journalist, I struggle to get through all of the manifestos in the run-up to an election day. And this is essentially what this book is about. It's not anything to do with the party manifestos among the political parties that are hoping to get South Africans to vote for them on May the 29th. It's having a look at their history. It's having a look at their core approach to key issues in South African society, ranging from safety and security, foreign affairs, economic growth and job creation, and tourism and artificial intelligence. It's really my attempt at trying to demystify what political parties are saying in the run-up to an election so that voters don't get confused with, well, they said that in the manifesto. Does it actually mean that they're going to implement it? This book is an attempt at trying to arm voters with the information that they need to make an educated decision on May the 29th.
In fact, that is what is the problem. Grandiose claims, downright lies at times. And it's for that reason, I mean, someone you share a platform with argued, one professor from the University of Limpopo, that perhaps one of the things we could look at is how to hold people accountable, look at whether these manifestos are implementable, realistic, or it's not just promises to sway voters and after the election all is forgotten.
Well, really, I mean, I think that's down to not only us as the media to remind people, well, this is maybe what the governing party has been saying for the past 30 years. What is their track record when it comes to implementation? I think opposition parties to a large extent, maybe to a lesser extent the DA, get a bit of a free ride though, because they've never had the opportunity of governing at a national level, be it in a coalition or otherwise. So they can make these grandiose claims because they say, well, once we're in government, we will do this. I think that it just becomes really, to a certain extent, fantasy, though, because we know that there's going to be many parties that simply won't make it to the union buildings after May the 29th. And voters need to be circumspect about the decisions that they're making based on the results of governance so far. I mean, the ANC does have the blessing of 30 years in power to have a track record to look back on, but it's also a bit of a double-edged sword, a curse, because you can continuously remind the ANC, well, you're saying that, but let's have a look at what the facts and figures state at this point in time. South Africa is not in a very, very good space, and unfortunately, as the national government for the past 3 decades, they have to answer for that.
Although, I mean, I think, that's beginning to change. I mean, the DA has been, in charge in the Western Cape for, about like more than 10 years now. I mean, of course, you had the ANC before them and so on, but you're also beginning to see your IFPs and other political parties, whether as individual parties or as parts of coalitions, beginning to build, or so to speak, or not build, a record, of performance that you can judge them by.
Well, certainly. I mean, let's also not forget the IFP ran the KwaZulu-Natal provincial government in the first electoral period from 1994 to 1999.
Exactly.
And also, to a lesser extent, you know, if they're not leading governments, there are political parties that play kingmaker. The EFF has already formed integral part of governments at a municipal level in metros around the country. We've also seen, you know, so-called minnow parties, smaller parties, Patriotic Alliance, ATM. They've held the mayoral chains in significant municipalities. So they do have a certain track record to speak of. And that's what I'm really hoping that this book tries to drive the point home. Don't just listen to what the politicians are saying in the run-up to the May the 29th. Try and appraise yourself with what they've done when they've been given the opportunity to govern. And failing that, this book at least gives you a little bit of a history of where they come from, what they've done in the past 30 years of democracy, and critically, you know, on 14 key issues in South African society, what their approach would be when it comes to governance.
Almost every human being on the planet wants the same thing. They want a better life for themselves and their family, and particularly to be secure in the knowledge that their children's life will be better than theirs, right? That's what everybody wants. If you look at, you know, a book like that, a book like yours, you'll see that the PAC and the EFF probably agree on a large body of things, and Freedom Front Plus and other parties at the other end will agree on that. Is there a lot of movement in the middle where everyone says roughly the same kind of thing? Everyone has a jobs target. No one says how they're going to do it.
Well, of course. I mean, there's a broad church in terms of, okay, we need economic growth and we need to ensure that more South Africans enjoy the fruits of freedom from an economic perspective. The route to that destination, vastly different. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. There's parallels to be drawn between the EFF, the PAC, even the ANC in that regard. But then you look at the DA, Action SA, Freedom Front Plus, parallels to be drawn in their approach. And then, you know, there's a lot of common ground when it comes to mineral resources, for instance. There's political parties from across the spectrum that are saying we need to beneficiate more. And it certainly does not make any sense to me as the layman. I'm not a mineral resources expert. Why are we still exporting the vast majority of the things that we take out of the ground as raw materials? Why is there no beneficiation industry in South Africa? And certainly that's at least one aspect that was very, you know, provided a lot of commonalities. When it came to artificial intelligence, I think that there's no party that actually has a solid policy. So I would say there's commonality in terms of an absence of an approach. There's a recognition that artificial intelligence is going to be important moving forward. What exactly South Africa needs to do to ensure that the little jobs that we do have are safeguarded when artificial intelligence really comes to the fore, I believe political parties haven't really begun to think about that properly.
In fact, that for me is the reason why I've very little faith in manifestos, because there you have a party that's been in power for 30 years and that hasn't done many, if not most, of the things that it promised to do, but it will still be the biggest party after this election. And that 58-page document that President Cyril Ramaphosa unveiled at Moses Mabhida Stadium. I think the people who went there went so they can have something or an armory to protect themselves because they knew exactly what decision they were going to take. They were backing a particular party. They've made that decision. That manifesto will help them, will help give answers to whatever question may be asked of their choice. And I believe, to come up with a 58-page document is also to say, I'm able to answer any question on whatever topic that there is to speak to. And of course, us who work in the media, we have to tell the story of the election. The manifesto gives you so much to talk about, when in reality, that probably matters very little.
Well, it's interesting, though, isn't it? Because, there's a lot of thought that goes into manifestos. And, in some political parties, you can see, perhaps, that they're the result of negotiation, maybe more in the ANC than in others. And the smaller the party, the easier it is to write.
Well, indeed. And I think that there's a fair amount of trade-offs as well. Have a look at maybe the DA's chapter in this book. They're talking about relaxing labour laws and providing an exemption certificate to workers that want to enter into short-term contracts with employers that don't have the rigorous labour laws and provide a bit of flexibility. But in the same breath, they're also talking about raising social grants. One of the very few parties that is actually talking about increasing it in a space where we're really, really fiscally strained as South Africa. But just to your point, where manifestos come around every single election, whether or not it's a national one or a local government election. And say what you like, the ANC is going to be the biggest party after the May 29th elections. And South Africans can wring their hands, they can complain. Opposition parties can also point fingers and say, why do you keep on voting for the ANC? I think that a lot of the blame really does reside with opposition parties, with their absolute failure to inspire South Africans to vote for them, provide a different vision to actually convince voters to go into a ballot box and put their mark next to their name, next to their party's name.
Nicholas Bauer, thank you very much indeed. Author of South Africa's Easy Election Guide, Who to Vote For in 2024.